Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video we're going to take a look at forms and validation in Blazor. Forms and validation are a crucial part of any web application. Being able to allow the user to submit input quickly and easily in a responsive way is the bread and butter of any single page application. Blazor comes out of the box with a few very handy components to support all of these features, and we're going to take a look at that in this video. This video is part of my Blazor series, so if you don't want to miss any episodes, please subscribe and ring the sub notification bell to get notifications for new episodes. Let's just dive into the code. So what I have here is a new form example.razor component, and that's a page component, which means it will be a page in the front end. And what I have is just a header one, and here is where we're going to create our form, and we're going to add some validation afterwards. The first thing I want to do is create a form with a few fields. And what I'm going to do is I'm going in the data folder and I'm going to create a new class. And what I will create in this form is just a way to sort of submit for, let's say you're applying for a job, so a job application. We're going to do that in this video. So I'm going to name my model job application. And we're going to add some properties in this class. The first thing I want to add, it's the full name, which is the candidate's name, so our name essentially. The other thing I want to add is, I'm going to call it description. It's potentially the content of your CV, but let's just say description. The other thing I need to add here is, let's say something like salary expectations. So that will be an integer salary expectation. I will also add something like does open source, so whether the user is doing open source or not, why not? And the other thing I want to add is let's have a date time, and the date time I want to have will represent the availability of the candidate, so when you can come in for an interview, essentially. That's it. And if we need anything else, we will add it after the fact. But for now, I think that covers everything I want to show. So we do have this here, and what I need to do is actually create the form that's going to use this object. So first, let's create a code segment, and in here is where we're going to create a new object, and this is going to be a private job application. And let's just name it job application equals new job application. So visiting the page, we're going to create a new object of that. And that is it for that. And we're going to go ahead and create our form. Now, Blazor comes with a built-in component called edit form, and we are going to use that. It's simple. You just say edit form. If I close it here, and we need a few things. First, we need the model. So we're going to say model equals double quotes at, and we're going to use the model, which in this scenario is the job application. So we're going to bind our model into that edit form. And then we're going to say on valid submit equals, and we need a method there which will be triggered once the form is submitted and is valid. And we're going to see validation in a bit, but first let's focus on submitting the form. I'm going to create this method called submit job application, and we are going to create this method down here, and this will be let's say a private async task, and then the name. And that's it for now. I'm not going to do anything with the response. In fact, if I want to do something, I'll do the following. I will create a div down here. And then in that div, add a span. And I'm going to name this span ID equals result JSON. And what I need is I'm going to collect all the data from this object and print it as JSON to show you what you would normally be submitting through this form in a very nice visual way without diving into console stuff. So the way to do that would be to use the method we already did in the previous video, which is await, and we're going to use our JS runtime here. So I've already imported the JS runtime. and I can say JS runtime dot invoke avoid async because we're not returning anything. Set element text by ID. And then the span name is result.json, so that's what goes here. And in a new line, I'm gonna say JSON serializer, which is the system.text.json that was added in $3 serialize. And then let's stick the job application object in here. So what this will do is when we submit this form, it will collect all the data that these values will have here and just show us what the current status is. So let's go ahead and build our form, and I'm gonna start with a single item first, then just go and see how it looks like in the front end, and then we're gonna continue adding things. So we need a label, and we also need another component, and we're gonna use the input text component here. And this input text component is a component that will create just an input text, but for Blazor, and you'll be able to wire up your field here. And let's see how we can do that. First, the ID will be, let's just see what is gonna be here. So full name, so I'm gonna put the full name here. So I'm gonna name this full name, and then I'm gonna say at bind hyphen value equals double quotes, and then the name of the object, and then the name of the property. And that's how I bind it. And now on the label, what I need to do in the label is say something like full name, and that goes here. And then the label needs to be specified what the label is for. So we're gonna say for equals full name. So now we just have this single full name thing. And then the other thing I wanna add is I'm going to create a button to be able to submit the form. And the only thing I need to do is just say type equals submit, and in the button text, let's just say submit, and that's it. So let's just run this and see what we got in the front end and what happens when I run it. So here in the front end, I have my form, and the only thing I see is, as I said, this label and this input text. And if I start typing here, let's say Nick Chapsas here, for example, and I submit, you see that we're printing this JSON, which represents the current state of our form, which is the submitted form. And you can see that everything but the full name, which is Nick Chapsas, has been already set by default. So strings default to null, ints to 0, bools to false, and the date to this. But that's what's happening here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a field for all of this using the Blazor component fields. So let's just go ahead and quickly do that. Where we need to start. I'm going to start copying things to speed this up a little bit, but the second thing we need is the description, and this is a description of yourself, and I'm going to change this to desk, so let's just use it here. And we also need to use, I'm going to be copying stuff around, but we also need to use description here in the bind value, and this no longer is an input text because we need more length to write stuff in that box. So we're going to use an input text area, which will create text area in the front end. So that is that. Let's move forward and create another one. And in this one, I'm going to put the salary expectation. Perfect. So salary goes here. This goes here. And let me just copy the exact name. So again, salary expectation. And that is here. And the last thing I need to do is, because this now is a number, I'm going to use the component input number, which will translate this in the front end in a num input field. You'll see how this looks like in a second. The next thing I want to add is a checkbox, and I'm going to add the checkbox which represents whether the user is doing open source or not. We just copy that, and I'm going to put that here. So are you doing open source goes here, and open source ID and open source ID here. And this needs to be an input checkbox, so it's going to appear as a checkbox in the front end. That's all built into Blazor, by the way. You don't have to write any of these components, which is awesome. And last but not least, is the availability. So in interview availability, and here I'm going to copy again the name, so it's just availability. So put that here and change this to availability. Such a hard word to type, isn't it? And of course, since this is a date, I need to change this to input date, another built-in component that allows me to use a date picker in Blazor. So I'm going to run this and see exactly how it looks in the front end. So that's what we have in the front end. Let's see what we've done here. So the full name, again, I'm going to say Chapsas. The description, as you can see, is a text area, quite big. You can say, hello, my name is Nick and I'm a software engineer. That is true. And then salary expectations, let's say 10,000. And then are you doing open source or not? Yes, you are. And then in here we have this date picker where you can just select a date and you can just pick today here and we'll pick the day, the current day. And then if we just click submit, you'll see that all these values have been successfully set here and we are able to submit our form and do whatever you want. You can post it into an endpoint, use a service to create an application in the background. All that is up to you, but the data is there and all you need to do is just use this object that you used in the code here and send it wherever you want. It's very straightforward. Now, what's not quite as straightforward in general, and Blazor makes it very easy for us, is validation. So in the same way that Blazor comes out of the box with these inputs that customize the input values and the input fields, it also comes with validation attributes. And by default is using the data annotation validator, but there are packages like the Fluent Assertions one, which I'm not going to be showing as part of this video, but I can if you want in a future one, which will allow us to add validation in our form very, very easily. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to our class here and we need to customize it to include all those validations. So let's see what we have. First, we need an attribute, and the attribute I need is the required here because this name is a required field. On top of that, the salary expectation and availability are required fields. We can say that description is optional, even though it's not really, just to demonstrate how a non-optional field would look like. But you might want to have some values here, but we're going to ignore it for now. The other thing you might want, however, is that the description cannot be bigger than a specific amount of values. So you can do that by using the string length annotation. And you can just say, what's the maximum length? I don't know, 500 values here. And then you can have an error message equals, you cannot put so many words here. Who knows, that's just all random, but whatever. Another thing is if you want to be within a range, so let's say the salary expectation potentially shouldn't be negative, even though it's an int and you are allowed to do that. So you can set the minimum, and the minimum would be, I don't know, 10,000, and the maximum can be 150,000. And then you can have an error message saying salary cannot be less than 10,000 or bigger than 150,000, whatever that represents anyway. And of course, pretty much any other annotation of the data annotations as an attribute would work in this scenario. So with that out of the way, we need to also enable the data annotator validator in our form. And the way to do that is by going within the edit form and saying data annotations. That's not how you spell annotations, that's with a T. So annotations, validator, I think I spelled that correctly. And underneath that, we're going to add a validation summary, which essentially will sum up everything wrong with the form. So let's run this and see what we did with the new validation added in. So here's application running again. And if I just don't fill in anything and I just run it, you will see that now I'm getting these errors saying the full name field is required and salary cannot be less than 100 more than that. So if I go ahead and set this to 7,000, I don't know, whatever, and press submit, this error goes away, but this one still persists. And then when I set the name, this is also the same. And you can also have custom validators to check dates and stuff like that. I don't want to show too much on the data annotations because this is not a data annotations video, this is a validation video. And because you can adapt any other validator in this, I don't want to be so specific, but you have to understand the workflow. This, however, is just one of the ways you can do that by having the validation summary at the top. But what happens if you want to have it just under the field that's actually wrong or above it? I don't know. You can do whatever you want in that sense. But what if we want to have it here within the paragraph? Well, there's actually a way to do that. You can use a validation message, which is another component. And all you need to do is provide the for method and say at symbol, and you need to point towards the value you're validating there. So for me, it's just job application full name. And that should be enough to do what I'm describing. So let's go ahead and run this and see how it looks. So application is running. If I go ahead and press submit now, I expect a message to appear under this. So as you can see, sure enough, we're getting this message here. Now, having it both at the top and here is redundant. So you have to choose how you want to do it, but this is all customizable. You can remove a component and add a component. That's all up to you. The last thing I want to show you is a feature I discovered recently, and I think it's very interesting, especially when it comes to forms. I want to show you how that works, but the main idea is the following. Let's say you're typing something, you want to show a type ahead, or you want to know exactly what the value is of a specific field, and as you're typing, you want to take actions like a map lookup, an email lookup, stuff like that. How do you do that? Well, it's actually very, very easy. Again, Blazor has a way to do that. The first thing I want to do is let's maybe move this result.json at the top because the form has been getting bigger and bigger and I want to be able to see it. And down here, I'm going to create a new string called current value. I'm going to set it to an empty string. And we might not even need that in the end, but that's fine. Let's just keep it there. And I'm going to say here type check. It's more like typing check, but fine. It's just a random name. And I guess I was right. I don't even need this current value at this point, but you could use it if you wanted to. I'm going to create here current value. And what I want to do is set the value of that JSON and say current value is potentially enable string interpolation here as well. Current value, and that's it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this on input equals, and then double quotes and the @ symbol and a parenthesis, and in here goes an event callback dot factory dot create binder, and I'm gonna specify the type as well. This is a string, and the first thing that goes here is this, which is the receiver of this event callback, and the next thing is an action. So the action has a string as a parameter, and this is the new value, and I'm going to say type check. I will need to wrap this into a task from result because it is an async method, and in here goes my new value and comma string dot empty. Because I don't actually have this current value thing I showed you before. If I had it, I would put that there as the existing value. So you can do something with the previous value of the field, but also the new one. Let me run this and explain how this works in the front end. So here I have the form exactly as it was. And as I start typing, I am typing. You can see that things are being set here as I'm writing. You can see that the value here is being automatically picked up as I'm doing this without submitting the form. This means that in this method, I can capture this value and do whatever I want with it. Make an API call, make a database call, make whatever you want. This is such a good feature and such a handy thing, especially for type heads and lookups, that I highly recommend you use it and potentially wrap it around the method as well to make it more generic. That's all I had for you for today. Thank you very much for watching. Special thanks to my GitHub sponsors for making these videos possible. If you want to support me as well, you'll find the link in the description down below. Leave a like if you like this video, subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Keep coding.